Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, absurdism in the extreme. It's all available here in the Tales from the Omni Vault book series. Check the description for Amazon links so you can get your copies and start reading today. Thank you all, and now, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Omni Viewer, and traditionally I've done follow-up videos every time I've released a new book, but I realized I hadn't done one for my latest yet, that being Crisis on ULALU. So here I am to make up for it. A little bit late, but hopefully this does get you interested in giving it a read. I actually kind of realized I had to do this when there was one comment on a video asking if the book was even out yet. Even though I had published a trailer and I'd added a new tag to the beginning, so I guess this is necessary. Yes, Crisis on ULALU, my 6th book and 5th novel, because I have a short story anthology, you know, is officially available on Amazon right now in paperback and digital. There will be a link down in the description of this video. But why would you be interested in it? Well, because this is the kind of sci-fi story that I've wanted to see come back for a little while. See, here's the thing. Even though most of you guys know me as a kaiju fan, or also like a heavy metal fan, or things like that, a Looney Tunes fan, I'm also a huge fan of space operas and space traveling sci-fi, particularly of the classic variety. I mean, I've said in the past, my parents made sure that I got a good formal education when it came to my pop culture intake, so they showed me the classics. Growing up, I saw Forbidden Planet, Conquest of Space, Destination Moon, First Men in the Moon, It the Terror from Beyond Space, 2001 A Space Odyssey, and of course Star Trek and Star Wars, but then again, that's expected, right? Obviously, I liked those things as well, but I had a wide variety. Not to mention that when I was a child, and my parents would read me bedtime stories, well, my dad decided that I had enough smarts in my head that I could comprehend hard sci-fi. So he read to me every single one of Isaac Asimov's Foundation books. None of the robot books. That was a little too much at once. We stuck to Foundation. But yeah, I got the Foundation series for my bedtime stories as a kid. Crazy, right? And of course, as I grew older, I expanded my horizons. That included anime, and I wound up seeing a lot of really cool space traveling anime. Obviously, there was stuff like Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star, but there was also Starship Operators, Crest of the Stars, all sorts of interesting space-type anime. And other things that came along that were new, like Firefly, the newer Star Trek entries. I'm actually one of the few people who likes Star Trek Voyager, if you can believe it, because again, when I was younger, watching new episodes of Voyager every Wednesday night was a family tradition. So maybe it's the nostalgia talking, but I have fond memories of Voyager. I know it's not everyone else's favorite, but I like it. And of course, I started digging into the really interesting books as well as I grew older. Stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels, C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, reading the Foundation books for myself, reading the Space Odyssey books for myself, things like that. So I've always had this love of spacefaring sci-fi, and you may have noticed, in particular, I like the retro stuff. I can't help it. Retro is cool. I think that the vision of the future that comes from the past is way more interesting looking than the future we've got now. I mean, then again, the future that we're currently living in has all sorts of promises that weren't delivered on. Oh, sure, we've got miniaturized phones in our pockets that demand our attention all the time and constantly force us to look down instead of at each other, but we're not on Mars yet, so there are plenty of disappointments to be had. I really do wish those older visions could have actually panned out into something, but that's beside the point. Point is, I like retro sci-fi, and I've always wanted to do something like that, but I didn't until I got the spark to. Now, the seed for what would become this particular novel was planted a while ago. Again, in part because I liked spacefaring sci-fi and whatnot, but also because I came up with one of the central characters a long time ago. When I was still in my teens, I was collecting the different Blue Oyster Cult albums on CD. As you may know if you watched the retrospective, I have every single one of their albums on CD. They're my favorite classic rock band, I can't help it. So, when I finally got my hands on The Revolution by Night, I heard all kinds of songs that I'd never heard before. I obviously knew the ones that made it onto the Greatest Hits albums, but I was hearing other things, of course. One of those things was the song Dragon Lady. Now, I was younger back then. I did not know what the term Dragon Lady actually meant. If you don't know either, basically it's a character archetype, some might say stereotype, of an Asian woman who is beautiful but also deadly. She will seduce you and then kill you in the cruelest way imaginable. Think Fu Manchu, but with curves instead of a mustache. So, I know that now. I didn't know it when I first heard the song. All I knew is that Blue Oyster Cult wrote about some really weird stuff, especially for other rock bands of the era. So, as I was listening to the lyrics, I interpreted it literally. I thought, oh, they're describing some kind of a fantasy creature that is a fusion of a dragon and a woman. And I got a mental image in my head, and I thought, I like that. Don't get the wrong idea. I'm going to use that character somewhere, figure out who this character is, and she'll appear in my stories at some point. Therein lies the rub, right? Because how are you going to work something like that into the stories I've got, even knowing how weird they can be? So I spent the next few years trying to figure out who this character is. Her role, her personality, if she has any special abilities. Eventually I decided that she might work better as an extraterrestrial, but I still had no idea where I was going to put her. I knew she was going to be part of this continuity I was developing, but how do I bring her in? That's the question. Also, before I forget to add this, the character's name is D.L. Stranick. And her first name is actually a reference to the song that inspired her. It's spelled D-E''E''L-L, but it's pronounced D-L, as in the letters D and L for Dragon Lady. Just a little bit of trivia for you there. Anyway, as I was trying to figure out how I would introduce D.L. into this universe, I watched a documentary about Chesley Bonestell, who is considered the space artist. If you haven't seen his work, then you really haven't been paying attention, because his work is everywhere. You've probably seen it at some point. He made space look really cool, and made space exploration look really epic. Again, really wish it had actually happened. But I saw this documentary, saw about his process and what kind of work he did, and I just got to thinking, I want to do with words what he did with paint. I want to make this epic space opera, and I'm going to do it now because I got the spark now. And of course, knowing this, hey, I've got an alien character. I can throw her in there. She can be the cornerstone, I guess you could say, from which everything else is built out around. And there you have it. I found a way to work her in. The story is in continuity with the rest of the stories, although it's a standalone at this point. And hopefully I managed to do what I set out to. Now, maybe you're wondering why you should pick this up when we're really not at a loss for spacefaring content. After all, they're still making Star Wars, for some reason. So what sets Crisis on ULALU apart? Well, for one thing, since I know a lot of you guys are kaiju fans, you'll be interested to know there is a kaiju in this one. Although it's not necessarily the way you would expect it to be. Or maybe it is, I don't know. I tried to make an interesting story out of it, but There is an interesting little twist I try to add with this particular kaiju and how it's depicted. Moreover, what sets Crisis on ULALU apart is that there are no human characters in it. I can pretty much say that now. There are absolutely no human characters in this book. There are humanoid characters, characters who have the general shape of a human being, but none of them are actually human from Earth at all. I wanted to actually see if I could tell a story like that and have it work. So, as a result, some of the characters are a bit weird. Either the way they express themselves, or certain practices they have, or just their outlooks on things. It's unusual, to be sure. Hopefully not so unusual that it, if you'll pardon the term, alienates you, but in a way that you'll find intriguing, I hope. So, if all of that sounds interesting to you, then, like I said, links are down in the description. Pick up your copy today. I think you will find it, hopefully, a nice deviation from the other stuff I've done. Because I did try to write it a little bit differently than I did with the other ones. So, yeah. If you did somehow miss it, Crisis on ULALU is out now. I hope you guys enjoy it when you read it. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.